That's okay, Josh. But my name is Dominic McCarter. I wrestled under the name DMAC, usually displayed in all caps. It's DMAC, not very exciting of a name. Where am I from? I am currently residing in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I'm from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Originally wrestled for and under BXW, which for the long haul was Bethlehem Extreme Wrestling. And that's what it was for almost a decade, believe it or not. I'll get into that. As far as who I was at the time that I created that persona, to be honest with you, there wasn't really much of a persona going on. When we first started, it was just a couple of us neighborhood kids in Bethlehem that were like, let's record us wrestling on mattresses. This is literally, when YouTube is starting to blow up. We're talking like late 2007 when we started to do this. And DMAC was just kind of like a neighborhood nickname. And so that's essentially what I would wrestle under. And, honestly, like I probably had the opportunity to change that and like have an actual gimmick or name, but I never did. In terms of who I was at that time, I was kind of a quirky kid, and I think maybe that's, why we the neighborhood kids that we started this BXW with, we were into wrestling, and it was a niche thing, and, instead of playing football in the backyard, we would wrestle. Obviously, we had no idea what we were doing for a long time. But that's, really what it started as. It was just kind of, I was a silly kid with a nickname from the neighborhood that used it under my wrestling gimmick for the longest time. Why did I start backyard wrestling? Well, as I was saying, we were just a bunch of neighborhood kids that liked wrestling, and YouTube was blowing up at the time, so we were like, let's record us wrestling and put it on YouTube, and it started to expand. A couple of us were still in middle school actually at that time, like 8th grade, and then there was one of our friends, his name was Justin. He was in high school, and he started to meet people through high school that were interested in wrestling, and that's when people like Showtime and Chris Mula and Mike Damage came into the picture. It was over the course of 2008, I guess. And we would wrestle once a week. Like, we had an actual schedule. I think it was every Thursday we would wrestle. But again, we had no idea what we were doing. We were just kind of a group of pretty diverse kids that, loved wrestling and wanted to get better at it. And we were self-taught, so to speak, for a long time. We ultimately would go on to learn and actually train. But it was just one of those things where it was more fun to us than playing football or basketball or whatever. We would lay out a bunch of mattresses and do suplexes and beat the hell out of each other. And be hardcore, we would use like chairs and ladders and stuff like that in every match. There was like no rules. It was Bethlehem Extreme Wrestling. So that's really what it started as. Just kind of a niche group of friends, just wrestling once a week throughout the summer and everything like that. As far as how we discovered the online community, as I said, this was still in the days where YouTube was kind of still in its infancy. We're talking mid 2008 at this point. We had been uploading on YouTube forever. There were a couple of other backyard, feds out there that, would watch our videos, and That started this kind of camaraderie with some of them. And then GBYWN came along. I wish I kind of remember exactly how we found out about it. I think it might have been that somebody that was on that forum had found one of our videos and was like, oh, come join this forum. I wish I could remember who that was. So we did. We joined the forum, and that's when our whole world opened up, where it was like, oh, like, what we're doing is cool to us, but then you see these, all these other feds, most of them doing way better than we were in terms of their talent, and we were like, oh, I want to be like them. How do we get to that point? So we started to maybe take it a little bit more serious. We still technically didn't have any actual training yet, but I think we started to try to hone in the skills that we did have, and luckily eventually that caught the eye of a bunch of people. It was kind of unfortunate because we stopped, BXW basically ended, so to speak, because we were dumb high school kids and a bunch of people got into fights, and it was stupid, right? But we ended, and for like a year, maybe it was less than a year, we weren't really doing anything, and that is when ultimately someone who shall not be named, and Hybrid, Michael Stroll, somehow found our videos on YouTube and reached out to, I believe it was Showtime, and we're like, what do you guys want to actually, move further with this? Do you want to train? And that's when we really actually started to learn how to bump properly, how to lock up chain wrestling, things of that nature, and that's when it really took off for some of us. Some of the other people that were part of the original BXW never really came back, but a lot of us, kept forward with it. And again, we're still really young. This is 14, 15 years old for most of us. So yeah, I mean, the GBYWN, like I said, it really opened our eyes to a whole new world out there, and luckily, like I said, it allowed others to find us, and that's sort of where we were able to integrate with other companies eventually. And this is where I'm going to get to the point where it's like, what did this community do for me growing up, and why did it shape me into the person that I am? And ultimately, I think that this community, as I was growing up, just taught me to accept and befriend people from all walks of life, so to speak. We were eventually meeting people from all these different states that came from all different kinds of backgrounds, but we all had that one niche interest, which was wrestling. And it was awesome being able to sort of be very close, have a brotherhood, so to speak, with people from all kinds of different cultures and backgrounds. And I think that allows me today to be way more open-minded. Obviously there's plenty of people within the community that may not agree on certain things, but we always come back to that brotherhood of the community itself, and that's the important thing. And I think that's huge, that you can love and respect others while not agreeing on things, or not seeing completely eye to eye on everything. It doesn't matter. And I think that's one thing really that the community of GBYWN and Backyard Wrestling taught me. growing up, because again, I was still a young teenager most of this time. And those are formative years, so it was really huge for me. What was my first Super Show like? So this comes back to, we were discovered, and a year prior there was Jersey Wrestling All-Stars, and Mike Damage and I got invited to go to Jersey Wrestling All-Stars 2. That was the first time that we ever traveled outside of our bubble, so to speak, to wrestle elsewhere. Mike's dad, Paul, was the one that took us there. I still vividly remember that trip. Basically, it was the first time that we were really traveling to do this. And we got to the venue, so to speak, of JWA 2, and that's when you're meeting people like, I wrestled JD Static, and it's like, never in my 15, 16 years at that point did I ever think that I would wrestle somebody from another company, so to speak, or another state. But that's the beauty of those super shows. And that's when you meet guys like Danny Danger and PJ Matthews and Matt DeMorris. And so these people that we were already looking up to in the backyard community through GBYWN, where it's like, wow, these dudes are so good, and now we're meeting them and getting to talk with them and get advice in a lot of ways, because again, me and Mike at this point are still so young, and I still remember that show vividly. It was an extremely satisfying experience. It was a ton of fun. We had the support of Mike's dad at that time, which was huge. He ultimately allowed us really to kind of continue that dream of pursuing this. And, luckily at that point now we're wrestling at our first Super Show. And it was a blast. It really was. So I kind of already have touched on it a little bit. Why this community is so important to others, why it's important to me. I've heard many people over the reunion show talk about how it literally saved their life. To me, it really goes back to that camaraderie, that brotherhood connection that you have with people that otherwise you may have never met or connected with. We all love this very niche thing. It's beyond just loving wrestling. It's beyond just being a wrestling fan. It's sharing in the art form, so to speak, of wrestling. Because I do think it is an art form. To kind of echo something that Tony Deppen told me over the weekend, but it really is. It's an art, and we come together as a group. A decade later, and it's like nobody's missed a beat. That was one thing, going into this reunion. Sort of, what does this reunion mean to me? And it meant the world. And I think the number one reason it really meant so much to me, and why it kind of solidified how important this community is to all of us. I was nervous showing up to this show that nobody would really remember me. I haven't talked to any of these dudes in 10 years. I sort of kind of drifted away from the scene for a bit as I was getting older into college and end of college. I kind of disappeared, and I regret that, because I was really highly involved, early high school into late high school, for myself, and I was just worried that nobody would remember me or care that I was there, and I couldn't have been more wrong about that. And it felt awesome. It was just so nice to reconnect with people that I would see 10 years ago at BXW shows or whatever, and catching up with these people, it felt like I traveled back in time to 10 years ago, and it felt really nice that it was like this community has always been there for me, even though I drifted away from it for a bit. Coming back to it, everybody was welcoming with open arms. People that I didn't expect to remember me were asking me like how life was and things like that. I don't know if that could be said for really any other kind of community or group that I have been involved in my past, in the past. It's just really nice to know that through all those like blood, sweat, and tears, 10 to 15 years ago, you formed this bond with some people that, again, you're not seeing for a decade. You go to a reunion show and it's like, wow, dude, I missed you so much. And that's how I felt about seeing a lot of the people that I did. It was just so nice to see, people again. And kind of share in that brotherly love, that brotherhood of this niche thing that we love that I don't really get to express elsewhere. I don't have many other friends that are wrestling fans. And again, it kind of extends beyond that, loving the actual art form of planning a match, competing in the match, selling and storylines and things like that. But obviously it extends beyond that because you form that initial bond there, and then it blossoms into truly beautiful friendships that even if you don't get to see or talk to somebody for years, is still there when you go back. And that means the world to me. I don't have anything else like that in my life. As far as the biggest takeaway from the reunion show, that's it. It's that no matter how long you've been gone, or how little you've caught up with people that are involved in the community, it's still there, and it's not dead yet. It'll never die, and it will always still mean the world to me and everybody else. I know that if I needed to come to somebody in the community because I needed help, or I needed a shoulder to lean on, so to speak, there are handfuls and handfuls and handfuls, of people that would help or be there in some way. Even though outside of the community we may not talk much, there's still that brotherhood. And that was really solidified for me this weekend, or this past reunion show. I think that's it, Josh. I hope I kind of went open-ended.